Question 1. If you have this type of calculator, using this button, you can enter the whole calculation in one go. So we've got square root of 20.4, and then I use these buttons to get to the bottom of the fraction and type in 6.2 times 0.48. If I press equals, it will give me the number straight away. And they've asked us to write down all the figures on our calculator display as a decimal. So therefore, I'm going to write them all down. If your calculator gives you the answer as a fraction, make sure you know this button here, the S to D button, which changes between fractions and decimals. If you have a different kind of calculator, like one of the ones we use at school, the best way to do this to make sure you get all of the marks is to start off by finding the square root of 20.4, which is 4.516635916, and then to find the bit at the bottom, 6.2 times 0.48, which is 2.976, and then to calculate the division. This way, if anything goes wrong with the calculation, you'll still pick up 1 mark for one of the others. So if you have the answer here and you've got at least 2 decimal places, you'll get 2 full marks. If you've got one of these numbers, you'll get 1 mark. The first part of question 2, you're asked to reflect shape P in that line. Remember, if you want to, you can turn this so it's a vertical line, which often people find easier to do. You can use tracing paper for it, or you just make sure that each point of that triangle is reflected equally on this side. So 1, 2, 1, 2, and then you should join it up with a ruler, but I'm not going to. That's worth 2 marks. If you get the correct reflection, but it's in slightly the wrong place, you'll still get 1 mark. Question 2b asks you to describe fully the single transformation that maps triangle A onto triangle B. Make sure you're starting in the right place. So we're starting at triangle A. If I look at the shapes, they haven't been rotated or reflected, and they haven't changed size. So I know therefore that this is a translation. You need to write translation for one of the marks and then give the instructions for it in the form of a vector. If I pick this point, I've gone 2 left and 4 down. So my vector should be -2, -4. And that gives you the other mark. So 1 mark for translation, 1 mark for -2, -4. In question 3, Fred is buying boxes, and he's bought 3 packs of 1,000 boxes. Each pack costs £193.86. Fred is going to get a discount on this, but to be able to work out your discount, you need to know the cost of his total order. So the first part of the question, you just need to work out the cost of 3 lots of £193.86. Okay, so I'm going to write that down. 3 times 193.86, and that equals £581.58. If I look at the table above, I can see that orders worth £401 or more are going to get a 15% discount. So I now need to calculate a 15% discount on this. The easiest way to do this is to change 15% into a decimal by dividing by 100, which gives me 0.15, and to multiply that by 581.58. You could, of course, find this using a non-calculator method if you preferred. So our discount is going to be £87.237. And for the moment, although this doesn't work in pence, I'm going to leave it at that. If you have rounded it, so you've rounded it to 87.24, you still get the marks. Okay, so now we want to know what his order is actually going to cost, because we've been asked to work out the total cost of the order after the discount. So I'm going to subtract that from this original amount up here, which is 581.58 minus 87.237. 20.237. Notice that I'm showing this working. I've been asked to. And if you don't, you could lose marks. So this is one where you could get the right answer and potentially lose other marks. So 581.58 minus 87.237 gives me 494.343, which appropriately rounded would give me £494.34. Note, because I am actually giving a cost, it needs to be in monetary units at the end. So this is the correct answer. Your marks on this question come from finding the total cost of the order, which was up here, being able to calculate the discount, and that's even if you actually calculate it wrong. You need to be able to show a subtraction, and you need to be able to give your answer, final answer, in units. Now your 5th mark, because this is a 5-mark question, comes from actually identifying the correct discount as being 15%. In actual fact, if you'd identified that incorrectly, you could still go on to get 3 out of the 5 marks. You wouldn't get the final mark for having the correct answer, but you would get the mark for calculating and subtracting a discount. Question 4 is a pie chart question, and you're just asked to complete the pie chart that has been started for you. The first thing you need to do is add up your total frequency, which gives us 72. And then if you remember, we've calculated each of these as a fraction out of 72 times 360. The magpie's already been done for us, so I'm not going to calculate that one. So I've got 10 over 72 times 360. I'll do the same with the 20. And the same with the 27. Now I'm going to calculate each of these, and you need to show your calculation, or at least the solution to your calculation, in order to gain some marks. So 10 divided by 72 times 360 gives me an angle of 50 degrees. 20, oh I don't need to do that one because this is twice as big, so it's going to be 100 degrees. And then 27 divided by 72 times 360 gives me 135. For completeness, if you want to make sure that they add up to 360, you could calculate the magpie. It would only take you moments. And it's 75. Okay, if I add all of these up, I do indeed get 360. So I can now go about drawing the pie chart. Okay, the thrush is going to have a 50-degree angle. So starting from the line that was drawn, going round to 50 degrees, I mark the point, draw the angle and label it thrush. I'm then going to put my protractor on the new line. You can of course turn your sheet round so that you can see it clearer. And we're going to 100. Now my 0 is the inside track, and I need this angle to be larger than 90 degrees. So I'm going to go all the way round to the 100 here. Mark my point, join it up, and label that starling. And my last one I don't need to draw, it will be sparrow, but I'm just going to check that it measures 135 degrees. So placing the protractor on here, and it does indeed measure between 130 and 140 at 135. And that's the pie chart completed. Your marks on this question come from showing a calculation that involves this total that you have calculated, for showing a correct angle, and then for drawing and labelling the correct pie chart. So it's 3 marks. If you've got the calculation shown, but one of your sections of your pie chart is incorrect, you would get 2 marks. If you've just drawn the pie chart, even if the angles are correct, you're only going to get 1 mark. Next question is based on speed, time and distance. So remember your triangle, sausages don't talk. So these represent speed, time and distance, and you need to use that to do this calculation. You're told that Aisha drives along the motorway from A to C, average speed of 50 miles per hour from A to B, and 60 miles per hour for the second bit. And you're asked the difference it takes to drive from A to B versus B to C, and to give your answer in minutes. Okay, so the information we've been given the speed and we've been given the distance, and we're being asked to calculate the time. So we're going to use this. So distance divided by speed equals time. To get from A to B, she travels 25 miles at 50 miles per hour. So my distance is 25, my speed is 50, and if I calculate that, 25 divided by 50 is going to be 0.5. Now, because this 50 was in miles per hour, this is telling me that that is 0.5 of an hour, or half an hour. Now, most of you will know that that's 30 minutes, but for the purposes of the next part of the question, if you wanted to know how to calculate that, you would times it by 60, because you're changing from hours into minutes. So that part of the journey took 30 minutes. To go from B to C, she travelled the same distance, which was 25 miles, but this time she was travelling at 60 miles per hour. So we're going to divide by 60. If I do that on the calculator, my answer comes out as 0.41 and the 6 recurs. Because the 6 is recurring, I'm going to leave this on the calculator, and just like I did for the first one, I'm going to times it by 60. That gives me the answer in minutes, which is 25. Now at this point, you could have earned 1 mark for either of those two calculations. So the second mark comes from doing a subtraction. So even if you've got other values, or even if you use these values here, if you do a subtraction, you will get a mark for the next part. Of course, 30 minus 25 equals 5 minutes, and that's our difference between the two sections of her journey. So 1 mark then for having either of these, so 0.5 or 30 or 0.416 or 25. 1 mark for showing a subtraction, be it that one or 0.5 minus 0.416 recurring, and 1 mark for getting the answer 5. If you got the answer 5, you do get all 3 marks regardless of working shown. There are lots of different ways to reach the final solution within this question, but the best thing to do when you get an angle question is to start labelling on the ones that you can calculate easily. So for example, if we just look at the top here, we've got a triangle and we know 2 of the angles, the 120 and the 38, but we don't know this one. So this one we can calculate by using angles in a triangle, and it's just going to be 180 minus the 158. So this angle in here we know is 22, and the reason we used was angles in a triangle equal 180 degrees. Now I've got that, because I've got a set of parallel lines, I know that this angle is on a Z shape, which means that this angle is also 22 degrees. And the reason for that is alternate angles are equal. Now your examiner or your marker is going to look at this diagram for things that are annotated correctly. The next one you can probably work out is this one in here. This one and this one lie on a straight line, and we know that angles in a straight line add to 180. So this angle here is 139 degrees. Again, we can put something in there. Angles on a straight line add to 180. And for completeness, we could also put in the opposite, the alternate angle here, which would be 38. And then we're in a position where we can work out this angle, because we know angles in a triangle, and we can also work out x, which is what we're interested in. So to find x, I'm going to do 180 minus 1 through 9 plus 22. And I'm doing it on the calculator because I want to make sure I don't drop marks because I've made a silly calculation error. So my answer is 19 degrees. Now if I've been labelling up here, I will have enough reasons to be able to get my reason mark. But your marks come from finding particular angles. I'm about to list them. Okay, you get 1 mark for finding either this one using the angles in a triangle or this one using alternate angles with ADB. So it's 1 mark for either of those two. You get 1 mark for finding the angle down here, BDC, through having found that one already. And then you get 1 mark for something that will enable you to find this X value. So if you've used this angle here, that would be good enough. If you're using something else, so for example the fact that the angle's in a triangle here and then finding that one because it's equal to the 120 opposite, but some kind of method that gets it to it. If you've got the answer 19 written somewhere, that is worth the same mark. So 1 mark for either of those angles, 1 mark for either of those angles, 1 mark for having the answer 19 or any type of calculation that would lead to finding angle X. But your 4th mark comes from having reasons. And your reasons need to be alternate angles are equal, angles on a straight line and angles in a triangle. But one of those reasons is good enough. They're actually only looking for one even though you've used many. 160 centimetres of gold wire has a weight of 17.8 grams. So to find the weight per centimetre, I need to divide the weight, 17.8, by the 160 that I currently have. So if I do that, 17.8 divided by 160, I get an answer of 0.11125, and that is the weight per centimetre because I've divided it by 160. So if I know that I'm then going to have 210, I just times that by 210. So the answer is 23.3625. They will accept anything from 23.3 onwards. So if you've got your answer between 23.3 and 23.4, you get the final mark. So 1 mark for a division, 1 mark for a multiplication, and 1 mark for your answer. Okay, you're told that n is an integer, that is a whole number that includes 0 and negative numbers. And this inequality tells you that n is greater than or equal to -1, but less than 4. So because it can equal -1, that's going to be our first, then 0, 1, 2, and 3. And it won't be 4 because it says it's less than 4. The question is worth 2 marks. You get 2 marks if you just have these 5 numbers written down. If you have one additional number, so say you had the number 4, or if you had one left out, so maybe you just wrote 0, 1, 2, 3, you would still get 1 mark. For question 8b, we're asked to write the inequality shown on the diagram. Now that means it's going to look like the question that went before, so we'll have an n in the middle, and then our sign comes from whether or not the circle is coloured in. So this one isn't coloured in, so it's just going to be a less than sign. And this one is coloured in, so it's going to be a less than or equal to sign. And the numbers that go either side come from the number line, so -4 and 3. Please note that when you're writing inequalities like this, they always point to the left. You don't have one pointing right and one pointing left. And the final part of this question comes from solving this inequality at the bottom. So I'm going to start off by moving -2 over to this side where it will become +2. And we are going to have 3y is greater than 7. And then to solve for y, or to find the inequality, I'm going to divide by 3 so that y is greater than 7 over 3. You can change it back to a mixed number. You could write it down as a recurring decimal, but it's absolutely acceptable to have it as that fraction. Now, if you manage to get this part, you would earn 1 mark. If you manage to get to here, you earn 2 marks. And that previous question, you do get 2 marks if it looks like this, and 1 mark if you have written them separately, or if you have the signs just switched round here. So if you've got equals and not equals there, you'd still get 1 mark. For this stem and leaf diagram, you're asked initially to find the median. You can do that by crossing out the values from either end until you get to the middle, or because you're told that there's 31 plants, you could add 1 to that number and halve it, and it would take you to the exact position. So 32 divided by 2 is 16, and it will be the 16th place. I know that most of you will do this by crossing out, so do remember, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. When you're coming down from here, you need to go across from the end here. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, here's my median position. And if I use the key, I know that the stem is worth 10, and therefore my median is 32. I'm then asked to find the interquartile range. The interquartile range, I'm going to need to find the upper quartile and the lower quartile. The lower quartile comes from finding the median of everything to this side of the actual median. And because I have a single median in the centre, I'm going to ignore it when calculating my quartiles. So I do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 1, 1, 1. I've totally messed this up, so hang on, I've crossed out 7 there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 there. Here's my lower quartile. So my lower quartile is 21. If I do the same for up here, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then 1 on either side, you can see that my upper quartile is going to be 45. So to calculate the interquartile range, I need to deduct the lower quartile from the upper quartile. So 45 minus 21, which gives me the answer of 24. In terms of scoring marks for this question, it's worth 2 marks at the bottom here. You get 1 mark for finding either of these quartiles. So if you've got the numbers 45 or 20 written down. Also, if you did include that, you may have the answers 43.5 or 19.5. And then the answer, which would of course have come from here, but the answer of 24 is where the other mark comes from. If you've not written these down and you've got the answer 24, you do get 4 marks. Question 10, there are loads of different ways to get to the answer. You're comparing petrol costs in the US with the UK, and you're given information about pound prices per litre, dollar prices per gallon, how many litres there are in a gallon, and a conversion rate between pounds and dollars. Note that the dollar, you get more dollars for your pound than the other way round. So to be able to do this question, you have to come up with comparable values. And that means either finding, comparing a UK litre price with a US litre price, or a UK gallon price with a US gallon price. So I'm going to start off finding out doing a comparison of litre prices. So we know in the UK that per litre it is £1.24, And if I wanted to convert that into dollars, remember my dollar is worth £1.47, I'm going to multiply it. So £1.24 times £1.47 or 1.47 gives me 1.82. So this is the dollar price per litre in the UK. The US price per litre, for a comparison, well, we only know the price per gallon, so we need to work out what the price per litre is by converting the gallon. I'm now going to work out the US price per litre. At the moment I've only been given a price per gallon, so I need to convert that into the number of litres that you get. Because it costs $3.15, I'm going to divide the $3.15 by the 3.79 litres you get per gallon to find out the cost per litre. So I've already done that here and it's coming out as $0.83. So from doing that comparison, you can see straight away that petrol is cheaper in the US than it is in the UK, and you need to make a statement to that effect. Other values you could have compared, if you've compared prices per US gallon, the UK price, so this is UK, is $6.90 to the US price of $3.15. If you've converted that into pounds, it's $4.69 compared with £2.14. So these are gallon prices. And then I've done the comparison on litres in dollar prices, but if you converted the litres into pound prices, it would be £1.24 in the UK, and in the US it would have been 56 pence. You need those comparisons and a statement saying that petrol was cheaper in the US. In question 11, you're given two cubes, or a cube and a cuboid, and you're asked to show that x cubed minus 10x equals 100. The first thing you need to do is write down the volume of each of the cube and the cuboid. So you can see here that the three dimensions are x, so the volume of the cuboid is x cubed. And on this side you're going to have 2 times 5 times x, which is 10x. So we now know what those two are. You get 1 mark for having one or other of those volumes on there. Now the volume of the cube is 100 centimetres cubed more than the volume of the cuboid, which means that x cubed equals 10x plus 100. So this is representing the 100 centimetres cubed that the x cubed is more than. So in order to show this, it's just a matter of rearranging that equation, and if I take that over, it becomes a minus, so x cubed minus 10x equals 100, and we get the second mark. So 1 mark for either of those two volumes, and 1 mark for showing the completion to x cubed minus 10x equals 100. The second part of the question asks you to use trial and improvement to find the value of x, and you're going to use this equation for your trial and improvement. So 3 columns, 1 for x cubed minus 10x equals 100, and 1 for your comment. Now they haven't given you a number to start with, so you're just going to need to use a calculator to pick a number that's it could be and work from there. So for example, if I do 4 cubed minus and then 4 times 10 for the 10x part is 24, so that's quite small. So I'm going to try this again with 5. Which is 75, and then I'm also going to try it with 6. So it lies between 5 and 6, so I'm going to put those down. So when x was 5, our answer in the centre was 75, which was too small. When x was big, our answer in the centre was 156, which is too big. We want the answer to be around 100. So I'm now going to check the midpoint of those two, which is going to be 5.5. And you can see that if you use the delete button in your calculator like this, you can just replace it with the number that you're trialling each time. Okay, so 5.5 gives us 111.375, which is still too big. So I need to pick a smaller number. So I'm going to go for 5.4 because it's fairly close. And that gives me the answer of 103.464, still too big. So I'll try 5.3. Which gives me the answer of 95.877, which is now too small. So I know it lies between 5.4 and 5.3. I'm going to try halfway between the two at 5.35, and my answer is 99.630375. Now this answer is still too small. It's still smaller than the top. So what I've got is I've got one answer that's too big, two answers that are too small, and I pick the odd one out, which is 5.4. On this question, you get 1 mark for doing a test between 5 and 6, and that includes 5 and 6 in this case, because you have had to find out the position where they lied. So it's actually 2 points for any trial there. You get a 3rd point for testing your midpoint, and your 4th point comes from actually rounding your answer to 5.4. So you should easily get 3 marks on this question. Make sure that you're doing your midpoint and rounding it correctly at the end to get all 4. Question 12, we're given some information and asked to draw a frequency polygon. Frequency polygons can be drawn from bar charts or on their own. So I'm going to show you how to do it from a bar chart. So if these are our frequencies, so I'm going to start off, it's a grouped section of data, so it's a grouped class interval. So my bar is going to run from 0 to 10 and my frequency is 4, like so. From 10 to 20, the frequency is 8. Make sure you've checked the scale. From 20 to 30, it's 14. Then 16 for the next one. 6 and 2. Now, this is a bar chart. The frequency polygon kind of looks like an iceberg. And what you do is you pop a P in the centre of each of your bars. And then you join those up with a ruler. So what you're left with looks something like an iceberg, and if you have space you can extend your last point down here. Now you get the marks regardless of whether or not you draw the bar chart, but what we're looking for is that the frequency polygon is plotted in the centre of each of those class intervals. So 2 marks if they are in the centre of those class intervals. If they're joined like this but at the ends or the beginnings of those class intervals, you would get 1 mark. And if they were just joined like a bar chart, you would also get 1 mark, but for 2 marks it needs to look like an iceberg. Part B asks for the modal class interval. Modal is just the mode when you actually have group data. So you go back to here, remember mode, most. You look for the one with the highest frequency or that would have the highest bar on the bar chart. This is your mode, and so our interval is 30 to 40, or it's here, because that's where the frequency is the highest. It's the one that has come up the most. And you just need to copy that down. If you've just written 30 to 40, you still get the mark. The final part of this question is looking for a probability that an office worker took more than 40 minutes to get to the office. Note they're chosen at random. So we need to create a fraction. The top of the fraction is going to be all of the people, the number of people that took more than 40 minutes, and the bottom of the fraction is all the people that went into work. So the first thing we need to do is go back to this table and add up everybody that is here. And if you add this up, it adds to 50. So the denominator on this is going to be 50 because the data was about 50 office workers getting in one day. And then we need to look at the people that took more than 40 minutes. So if I go to here, those people are these ones. So the people that took from 40 to 50 or 50 to 60 minutes, all of those took more than 40 minutes. And in total, there's 8 of them. So the probability that the person we choose took more than 40 minutes to get to the office is 8 out of 50. And in terms of the mark, if you have the number 8 over a different denominator, you would get 1 mark. Or if you have a different number over 50, you would get 1 mark. And if you've got 8 over 50 or something like 0.16 or 16%, you could also get 2 marks. Equally, if you've simplified it to 4 over 25, you'd get both marks. Next we have a triangular prism. We are given its dimensions and its density, and we're asked to calculate the mass. So the first thing that will be of use to you is the mass, density, volume formula triangle. So we have mass at the top and density and volume at the bottom. And although we know the density, we don't currently know the volume, and we're being asked to find the mass. So the first thing I'm going to do is find the volume. The volume of a prism is the area of the cross section times its length or height, depending on how it stood. So I'm going to find the area of this triangle and multiply it by 15. The area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2, and all of that will be times by 15. So here we go. I'm going to do 12 times 5, divide that by 2 and multiply it by 15. And my answer is 450. So this is the volume of that prism. Most people forget to divide by 2, and that then means that they're not going to score any marks on this question. So now I know the volume and I have the density here, I'm able to find the mass, which is what they've asked for. And if I look at the formula triangle, it works just like speed, time and distance and all the other formula triangles you see. So the mass is going to be the density times the volume. So I'm going to do 6.6 times 450. And the answer is 2,970 grams. And the question is asking for the answer to be in grams, so I don't need to do anything more. 2,970. Your marks come from being able to find the volume of the prism. So if you've got 450 written down or this calculation written down, you get 1 mark for times in by 6.6, but that is dependent on you accurately finding the volume in the first place. So if you don't get that mark, you can't have this one. And the final answer comes from 2,970. On this question, if you have this as your answer, you get all 3 marks, even if your working wasn't shown. Time for some factorising. For the first question, I look at it, it's only got 2 terms, but it's not joined by a minus sign, so I know it's not going to be a difference of 2 squares, which indicates that it's going to go into a single bracket. So here's my bracket. So first of all, what's got in common with both of the terms? It's x. I'm going to take x out, and x times x would give me x squared, and x times 7 would give me 7x. There's just 1 mark available here for the right answer. For question 2, I've got 3 terms, and if I look at it, there isn't anything that these terms have in common throughout. These have y common, these have 2 common, but there's nothing that's common to all 3. Because it's y squared at the beginning, that's an indication that it's going to go into two brackets. And because there's no number in front of y squared, it's going to be the straightforward one. So I look for two numbers that multiply to make 16 and add to make minus 10. So if I start with this, I've got 2 and 8. They wouldn't add to make minus 10 unless they were both negative themselves, which would still give me the plus 16. So that's what I'm going to use. It's going to be y minus 2 and y minus 8. Minus 2 times minus 8 is plus 16, and minus 2 minus 8 is minus 10. So this is correct. You can have 1 mark here if you have these with the wrong signs. If you have written them down with plus signs in, you can have 1 mark. But for 2 marks, you have to have both of them. But remember, they can be in either order. For part C, we again have 3 terms. There isn't a factor that's common to all 3. It does have a t squared in it, but this time there's a number in front. So this is going to be our squiggles method, but some of you may use the grid method and try and improve different things. The squiggles method, I'm going to start off by doing 2 times 2, which are the 2 outside numbers multiplied, which give me 4, and then I need factors of 4 that add to make 5. Well, the factors of 4 that add to make 5 are 4 and 1. I rewrite this then, unsimplifying the 5t. So I've got 2t squared plus 4t plus 1t plus 2. Then I put my squiggles in, and then I factorise each side. So on this side, 2 is common to both of them and t is common to both of them. So I'm taking out 2t. And 2t times t would give me 2t squared, and 2t times 2 would give me 4t. This bracket I want to be t plus 2, which means I'm going to multiply it by a plus 1. Then I just need to take my brackets that aren't, my numbers that aren't currently in brackets, and put them in 1. And my other bracket will be t plus 2. And then it's done. If you got this far, you would get 1 mark, and it's 2 marks for getting to the complete full answer. For the second part of this question, you're asked to explain why this expression can never have a value that's a prime number. This is the expression that you have just factorised. So think about prime numbers. Prime numbers have 2 factors, 1 and themselves. They're the only 2 factors that they can have. So if we look at our factorised version here, one of our factors is going to be, sorry, I've written plus 2. One of our factors is always going to be bigger than 1 because we're adding 1 to it. And one of our factors is always going to be bigger than 2, so therefore it can't be a prime number. So you needed to say that this number will always be a number that's been multiplied by numbers that are bigger than 1, so it therefore can't be prime. Question 15 concerns a trapezium, and you're asked to calculate the length of AC. It's always useful to draw the length that you are actually calculating onto the shape so that you can see where it is and what it does to the shape. Now, if we look here, it gives us the side of a triangle, but this is a non-right angled triangle and we don't know any of its angles. So there's not anything that we can do with that that's going to enable us to find the line AC that I've just drawn. However, on this side of the shape, we've got a right angled triangle. So if I could find out this length, I would be able to find out this length here. So just looking at the shape, this length is the width, it forms a right angle. And if I was to draw a line across here, which I'll do in a different colour, you'll see that I've created a rectangle, but also above I've created another triangle. Now I know the length of this hypotenuse, and because I know this length over here, I can actually find this length that goes up here. So we know the whole thing is 9 centimetres long, and this bit is 3 centimetres, so this bit here must be 6 centimetres. So I now know enough information about that triangle to be able to use Pythagoras' theorem to find this side length here. I'm going to sketch that triangle out quickly. So this is just taken from above, that's 6 and that's 10. And I'm going to use Pythagoras' theorem. Now Pythagoras' theorem tells me that the square of this plus the square of this equals the square of that. And so if I'm finding a shorter side, I'm going to take the square of this away from the square of that. So we're going to have 10 squared minus 6 squared equals the side that we're trying to find here. 10 squared is 100, 6 squared is 36, gives me the answer of 64. And to find the side length, I just need to square root it. So the square root of 64 is 8. So I now know that this side is 8 centimetres long, and I can add that to my shape up here. So this side is 8, and because these are right angles, this is a rectangle, so this side is 8 too. You can now see that I've got this length and this length, which would enable me to find AC, which is the one we're interested in. So again, just going to sketch that below. I've got a side length of 9 and 8, and this is the side that I'm finding. This is side AC. Okay, this time I'm finding the hypotenuse, so I'm going to add these two squares. So 9 squared plus 8 squared. And remember, you can do this straight onto your calculator using the squaring buttons. Okay, that answer equals 145. And to find the length, I'm going to find the square root of 145. On the calculator, I can leave my answer in, press the square root button and press equals. And that's coming out as 12.0415945. The question has asked me to round this to 3 significant figures. So that's 1, 2, 3. And the 4 isn't going to change that, so my answer is going to be 12.0. So here's where your marks come from. If you get the answer 8 or have the full working that leads to this answer, you get 2 marks. If you've got the fact that this measures 6 centimetres long, so if you haven't got as far as this 8 here, but if you know that that equals 6, you do get 1 mark for that, but you're not going to get much further than that. Your third mark, if you've got 2 from the 8, is going to come from this 9 squared plus, and it says 8 squared here, but you could get that mark from using a different number, as long as you have that clearly marked as that addition. And your fourth mark comes from square rooting that answer, and your fifth mark from having the correct answer. Note that these marks here on the blue working you can't have if you didn't get any marks above. So they are dependent on having a mark from earlier on in the question. Question 16 asks you to calculate a percentage decrease. The first thing you need to do is find the actual decrease, which we'll find by doing 64.8 minus 59.3. You can use your calculator for that, but the answer is 5.5. That's worth 1 mark. We're then going to write this actual increase as a fraction out of the original amount that we had. So it's going to become 5.5 over 64.8. We wouldn't usually put decimals into a fraction, but if you kind of have the idea that this is that amount of increase out of the whole, it's often quite helpful. And of course on your calculator you'll just do that as a division. To change this into a percentage, you need to multiply that answer by 100. So first of all, let's do 5.5 divided by 64.8, which gives us this 0.0 848,76543, and then I'm going to times that by 100 to get the percentage value. So it's 8.4876. Again, we're asked to round to 3 significant figures. That's 1, 2, 3. This 7 is going to tell me to round up here, making it 8.49. So the percentage decrease was 8.49%. Your marks here come from the subtraction, so a nice easy mark first of all to get the actual increase. This calculation, but you only get it if you've already got that mark, but of course if you haven't got that you couldn't do this working anyway. And your final answer comes from having 8.49. Now note that on this question, if you've just written down the answer, you'll only get 1 mark because they were interested in seeing your working. In question 17 we have a right angled triangle, so you should be thinking either Pythagoras or trigonometry. For Pythagoras you need to know 2 side lengths, and we don't know 2 side lengths, we only know 1 and an angle. So it must be trigonometry, and it's the SOHCAHTOA sort. So the first thing we need to do is label our sides in terms of opposite, adjacent and hypotenuse. Your hypotenuse is always opposite the right angle and is the longest side. I always like to think it's got an arrow pointing at it using that part of the right angle. So this is my hypotenuse, and the other sides are labelled based on the angle that we're using. So we're using this angle here, so this is going to be our opposite side and this is going to be our adjacent. We then need to think about what we know and what we're trying to find out. So we know this side and we're trying to find out this side, and they are O and H, and O and H are with our sine rule. So to do the calculation, useful if you can remember the triangles, but they do work like this. So here's the formula triangle, and we are trying to find the opposite side, so it's going to be the sine of the angle times the hypotenuse. So in this case, sine 60 times 32. When doing this, make sure that your calculator is in degrees or it will give you the wrong answer. So sine 60 times 32 gives me an answer of 27.7128. And once again, I've been asked to give my answer to 3 significant figures. 1, 2, 3. This 1 won't change that 7, so my answer is 27.7 centimetres. Your marks come from knowing that you need to do sine 60 times 32, and from your answer being correctly rounded. For question 18 we need to complete the table, and the graph is just 6 divided by x. Here are our x values, so I'm going to start with 6 divided by 0.5, which is 12, then 6 divided by 3, which is 2, and 6 divided by 5, which is 1.2. There's 2 marks for having all of those answers correct, and 1 mark for having 1 or 2 of them correct. I'm then asked to draw the graph on the grid, and I use the points from the table above and plot them. So I'm going to plot 0.5, 12, then 1, 6. Do check the scale so that you are plotting in the right place. So there's all my points drawn and connected, and apparently it is easier to draw a curve like this upside down. So I'm going to turn it upside down and join it up with a smooth curve. I'd recommend that you do this in pencil, so if yours goes horribly wrong you can actually do something about it, and it should end up looking like that. Now the marks on the second part come from having the correct graph. If you've plotted at least 6 of the points, so you had 7 to plot, so at least 6 of those are correct, you get 1 mark, and if you actually join them up with the curve, you get 2 marks.